Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me tell you about the only supplements that I use. For nearly 10 years, Bare Performance Nutrition has been on a mission to educate, inspire, and improve the performance of modern-day athletes, adventurers, and warriors through training, nutrition, and supplementation. With effective formulas that work as hard as you do and are third-party tested for prohibited substances, you can get results and reach your full potential with Bare Performance Nutrition. Head to the link in the show notes to go to the website to help me out and to help you out so that we can go one more together. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 95. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest on the East Coast, Vin Miceli. Vin, how's it going, man?
It's going awesome, man. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you. Been a longtime fan. We have a ton of mutual friends and just really love the way that you hold down some conversations. So I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I have to give you a compliment right up front. That mustache is something to be jealous of. I am jealous of your mustache.
Well, thank you very much. I did it as a joke to some of my employees in one of our Zooms. And then one of them, we were heading to a conference and he's like, hey, on Monday, definitely don't shave it. Let's go to San Diego with that thing. And I was fortunate my whole life. My father had a pretty awesome mustache. So as a spitting image of him, I knew that at least I could pull it off a little bit. So now it's rocking and I'll enjoy it as long as I can.
I love it, man. Well, I say keep it. And I'll let you introduce yourself to the audience however you'd like, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah. Vin Miceli, New York born and raised. I am about as serial entrepreneur as you could be, as even though in the past, I'd say 3 years, it's been really cool to be that. I've never considered myself that, but I've been running my own companies probably since about 2008. Owned and operated a lot of different companies, kind of just been all over the map, did tons of different types of fitness. If you could name it, I've tried it. I've considered that I could win it or do it. I'm about as trial and error person as you could imagine.
Where did that come from? Do you get that from one of your parents?
Yeah, so my dad has owned his own businesses as long as I've known. I think he had a regular job as a margin trader for like a week. And then owned cab companies, owned sanitation businesses. He's owned his own, he's owned and operated a company that's still running that my brother runs now for probably about 40 years, located in the Bronx, New York. So that was always kind of in us. My mom, not so much. My mom, I think, would have really loved not only my father, but, myself as well, to like get a normal job, get a Rolex at the end and a pension and all that good shit. So I've kind of been working on my own. As soon as I was old enough to earn money from someone, I got a job. And that's, from being a caddy to making pizza to, I've been trying to make money as long as I can remember.
What is the role that money plays in your life? I'm interested because from our previous conversations, it sounds like a lot of what you do is centered on making and distributing money. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to create impact. So I'm curious, what does money play in your life?
Yeah, I think I was really lucky, both in high school where I worked and made what I would consider for a high schooler before social media and like the ability to earn money online, good money. And then I made a lot of money in college with my first company and a full-time job. So I worked at a mutual fund company full-time, and then ran my own companies at night, throwing parties throughout the state of Connecticut. So I was fortunate that I earned money early on in my life and understood that Um, things are things, they come and go. Like money's really just a means to do things that other people might otherwise not be able to do. It's not really about like driving a nice car and things of that such. And then in hindsight, I was fortunate, but I went from being rather successful in my 20s to being completely bankrupt and broke prior to 30 years old. And that it changed my perception of money, because up until that point, I had been, I would say, rather greedy in how I wanted to make money and earn money. I was like, I want money. I want this for me. I want, you know, I want to be wealthy. And over the past decade, I'd say maybe a little bit longer, I had a different ethos, which is now, and I touted in my companies, and to my employees and people that I work with. It's like, if I can be a part of trying to make as many people wealthy as possible, there's no chance that I don't also win. And almost everyone that works for me has some side hustle that I've either fostered, helped, given their blessing on. I mean, I am about as much a do as much as you can and be happy, for all my employees.
I will say that is so unique. I know many CEOs and founders who um, do not encourage side hustles, do not encourage people to do things outside of driving the mission of that company forward. Are you ever afraid that people will branch out so much away from your work with them and your company that they will leave? Is that a fear of yours?
Um, uh, not enough for it to matter. Because people will screw you, people will rob from you, people will leave you regardless. And when I think about clients or employees, from the second someone is either working with or for me or buying a thing that one of my companies offers, the clock immediately starts to the time they no longer do that. So the probability of an employee starting their career and finishing their career at the same company in today's world is, I'd say, probably zero. And the chances that a client stays with someone their entire journey buying the type of product you sell is also zero. So to me, I have just found that maximizing the positive impact you have with your teams and your clients while you have them only benefits you in the long run. And I've had a number of employees work for me in multiple of my companies, leave and come back, leave and start companies that we then work together on, leave and become more successful than me, and then invest in my companies. I mean, I've short of massive insubordination or a complete disconnect in personal values. When someone leaves my companies, I always say the same thing. I'm like, I want to know the second it's a thought in your mind, not so I can fire you, so we can either solve it together, change our relationship, or I can help you navigate your next journey. And I've negotiated offers at new companies for my employees for them. I've helped them with their back and forth with the new employer. And in some scenarios, I've had people give me like a year notice. They're like, hey man, this is my last year with you. Like, how do you want to do it? And by the end of that year, they change their mind or they move on and it's great. So it's definitely a different approach. Especially in the fitness space. It's very much so like, hey, I'm giving my 2 weeks, and a lot of times that owner or boss fires the person on the spot, right? You see that happen a lot because people are afraid of stealing clients and all these other different kind of nuanced pieces of how boutique fitness works. And for me, it just never resonated because I'm like, hey man, like it's the reality of life. You're gonna leave and something's gonna happen that you're not happy with, and maybe we can fix it and maybe we can't, and that's all good.
So you used the word happy there. And before this episode, one of the questions I asked you was, what's the hardest question you've ever been asked? And you said the question was, what is happiness? So I'm curious to hear your answer to that question.
Yeah, it's, and that question actually stumped me when I read it, because I'm like, what is the hardest, like, what does that mean? And I think as you age, we lose the allure that life is roses and amazing. And really what I believe life ultimately is a lot of really hard situations and roadblocks that have happy interactions sandwiched in between them. And when you ask someone what happiness is, especially for me, one that changes depending on my situation. It changes depending on where I'm living, who I'm with, who's around me, what my daily interactions are. So like happiness 10 years ago to me was being able to buy food. I'm like, I could buy food and keep my cell phone on. That's happiness. Happiness for me today is not that, right? So it's such a unique question because happiness to every individual is completely different. And I think most people don't actually know what happiness to them is. And one of the things when I was broke, and I was like bankrupt and 100 pounds overweight. I mean, I had like no redeemable qualities for a human to want to know me, right? Romantically or non-romantically. It was like, even from a friend standpoint, from business partners, I'm like, wow, I like just blew up a $50 million business. I'm really fat. I don't have any money. And one of the ways that I changed my life, besides giving up drinking and drugs and smoking, which I just did on a whim, because it was the only thing I could control, I made a list of not things that I like. So a lot of times you hear people be like, oh my God, like make a list of things you like, and then that will drive your happiness. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I think that's the wrong question. And what I did was I actually made a list of things that I felt enjoyment upon completion. And they're two very different questions, right? Because like I like playing video games, but I feel worthless after playing 5 hours of Call of Duty, right? Like they're not the same outcome. So this was probably in 2011 or 12. I created this list of things that I genuinely feel enjoyment upon completion. And then what I did is I just removed everything that wasn't on that list. Unapologetically, hard no, it just doesn't happen. And a really good example is this. The last year that the old Yankee Stadium. So anyone who's a New Yorker, I think still can believe that the original Yankee Stadium is the Yankee Stadium. And that last year, I think my older brother and I went to like 40 or 50 home games. And we used to go scalp the tickets outside and sit in all different pieces of the stadium just to like experience it. And once I lost all my money and I started working towards rebuilding my stability as a person, I found that sporting events really were only, and to any sports fans out there, like no issue. Like all my siblings still love sports. I mean, I was a huge fan of UEFA soccer for a ton of years, but I found that a lot of my really good friends were either gambling on sports and never actually happy watching them, or were going to sporting events or watching sporting events and just like killing and wasting time. So while going to sporting events was something I liked, I just removed it because I was like, I don't get any, like my cup doesn't get filled up going to these things anymore. Whereas like live music, I'll like rearrange the world to go to a concert. So that's why what is happiness is such a hard question, because it's like, who's the person that measures that? What's the barometer of happiness? Is it being able to afford your rent? Is it having a partner who trusts you and loves you and supports you? Is it being a good parent? Is it like, there's so many facets to it. So to me, it's completely, it's like a completely subjective question.
Yeah. I've got a follow-up that might even be tougher. To you, what's the difference between happiness and fulfillment?
Yeah, that's amazing. So when I look at fulfillment and things that I get that feeling of, again, filling my cup with, right? So last year I set out to read 100 books, which was a really tough it was not any, I didn't complete it. So I'm not going to sit here and like tell some cool story that I fucking murdered that goal. I think the year previous I had read 30 or 35 books, and I'm like, okay, I want to read 100. And I made it well into those numbers. But the reason I bring that up is this. I feel massive fulfillment upon completing a book that I enjoy. Right. I also feel fulfillment when I finish a book that was really tough for me. And I might not feel the same level of happiness as I do as like backcountry snowboarding. Right. They're very different levels of success to me, and things that I enjoy in my life and are big parts of my life, but I actually have different feelings on the other side of that. And when I think of what fulfillment means, like, so in my gym, for example, so I own a gym in New York, and I've had some of my employees have been with me since we opened 10 years ago, right? And they have very clear 5-10 year goals. They have trajectories. I've worked with them in different pieces of outside of their professional life. And when I look at some of those people on my team, like, I have immense fulfillment to that. The things I've done and the mistakes that I've made, they get to either avoid or learn from prior to having to do that on their own. And then when I look at the fulfillment they get from their career, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
So, and that was a great question. I kind of just like thought through that as we were doing it, but that's a really unique way to think about both of those things, because people tie them together, right? Like happiness and fulfillment. Are they the same thing? And it's like, I guess they're not really.
Yeah. Part of me wonders if you can have fulfillment without other people involved. And maybe the way my brain works is like happiness and pleasure are more closely related than fulfillment and pleasure, because fulfillment has some sort of meaning that's attached to it. And I think you can find fulfillment and happiness, like you said, on the other side of really hard things. They don't have to be the most enjoyable things in the world. You can find that as you push through something challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I find it so I'm sober. I've been sober for a number of years. Like I said, maybe 2011 or 12, and I don't push it on people. I talk about it if it gets brought up. I've done a lot of talks in like sober groups and things of that sort, and I find it an immense amount of happiness and fulfillment when someone tells me that I'm the reason they gave up a thing that was affecting their life in a massive negative way.
Yeah, that's a great example. Actually, something we share in common. It's been a little over 10 years for me since I've touched alcohol. But I think we'll probably get into all of this. I want to ask you this first major question. We got connected through a mutual friend directly, Dan Stoddard, who's an incredible, amazing, one of the best human beings I've ever met. Episode 55 of this podcast. And when he introduced us, we hopped on a phone call. And I very quickly realized that when I asked this question, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to handle? You were probably going to have some crazy story for me, or like 20 things that came to mind. So I've been patiently waiting this answer to the question, what is the hardest thing you've ever had to handle?
Yeah. So we'll yeah, there's a lot there. So, okay. So the hardest thing I think I ever had to handle, when I owned my first real businesses after leaving Wall Street, I owned a hospitality brand that ran 3 properties in Manhattan, and we were doing, I think it was like 40 or 50 million a year in revenue. And we had some internal problems. A partner of ours was doing certain things that he shouldn't have been doing. It was just some odd things. And I had thought I had like made it, right? I was running this massive business. I was an investor in the business. I mean, it was like, I'm like, cool, I made it. And then a guy got murdered in one of my properties, and really the entire house of cards crumbled almost instantly. And it was like multi-million-dollar apartment, big life, traveling all the time. moving back into my high school bedroom, like at 28 years old. And that's not the worst part to me, but one of the things that happened is in owning these businesses that I technically should not have been allowed in anyway. I wasn't tall enough. I wasn't like, I didn't play the part. And in New York City nightlife at the time, which was like the heyday of nightlife, the vibe of a room was dictated by the type of person in the room on that given night. And really, like, I shouldn't have been in my own business. So allowing a lot of friends of mine to even frequent my own companies didn't happen. So I lost all of my main actual friends. And then when my businesses closed down, the other like 80% of my phone also became worthless. So I like moved home. I like went back to and I was fortunate, right? Like my parents were like, all right, come on back, like lick your wounds. We could figure this out, whatever. But I think one of the biggest things, besides my best friend Anthony, who's an investor in every one of my companies, I mean, he helped prop me up when I was dead broke. Knowing that almost every single phone number in my phone was completely worthless was a really odd feeling of loneliness, because I was dealing with the self-worth of my business imploding and being bankrupt, and actually bankrupt, not like just talking, like going through those motions of going to court. And then on top of it, not actually being able to call all the people that I was friends with for 20 years. And then all the people I had built relationships with for the years I was in the industry. And that was a really unique feeling, because I couldn't like even afford to go to therapy either. So it's not like I didn't have an outlet of anything. And I really turned to fitness for that. I had like then lost 100 pounds. I was running I mean, that's where I got so much solace in this level of loneliness that I still struggle to put into words. Because I don't know if you could like wrap your head around going back into your high school bedroom at 28 after managing $1 billion on Wall Street, running a $50 million business, and then I couldn't keep my cell phone on, right? Like, so that swing, and it was less financial for me, but that was like that setback, I think, changed the way that I even thought about myself for a long, long time. It changed the way that I thought I could interact with people. It changed the way that I thought I was able to do business, my intelligence level, my ability to build companies. I mean, it probably set me back for a really long time. And that was a really challenging business aspect that I had to deal with. And, you know, my relationship failed. I thought I was getting married too. Like, it was like so many things happened all at once. And that to me was like the culmination of the bottom, right? So people talk about like what their bottom is. And mine actually wasn't that. Like maybe 6 months prior to all of that, I had like stood on the balcony of my apartment, and I was like high and drunk, and we were playing video games. It was like probably 4 or 5 in the morning. And I remember like climbing over it and looking down. I was like 33 floors up, and I'm like, cool, we're just gonna, you know, have at it, right? And I remember looking down and being like, and now when I tell the story, it's probably a little bit longer than the actuality of the thoughts, but it was like, oh, cool, my book doesn't end like squashed on the street. Climb back over, flicked my cigarette off, went back in and finished playing FIFA, right? So I would say that was like the beginning of the bottom, and then my ultimate bottom was like that culmination of all of the things leading to that. And in hindsight, people are like, oh my God, like, okay, was that actual suicidal activity? And had I slipped, done, right? That becomes the story. But to me, I wasn't, right? It was just this thing that happened. I went on, and I never actually talked about it for years. It didn't even register for me. And I don't, you know, when I think about like how that shaped me and the way that I try to do business and the way that I try to navigate how I'm seen and how I show up in the world, it's a continual struggle for me to like to always think how, you know, how I'm affecting people and how I can affect people. So I know I kind of drifted for a second.
No, that was great. If you don't mind me asking, when you were in that season of rock bottom, were you
Mhm.
imagining in your mind that you had to or wanted to climb back up to the same peak that you were just on in terms of business and money and relationships? Or were you looking forward toward maybe different mountains?
Yeah. So when I was like when I was at my lowest point financially, emotionally, I was in amazing shape. So like now my shape was solved. I was like 157, walking around at like 5% body fat. I could, you know, uh, like that part was solved. And I'm like, okay, cool. So, but everything else was shit. And I knew that I was in my heart that I kind of was destined to do great things. And I talk about this a lot. Great people can be good or bad, right? Like you have to be an extraordinary human to achieve things in this world that could be used for good or bad, depending on who you are. And I knew that I wanted to impact the world that way. And truth be told, I had no idea what I was going to do next. I had like the way that I describe it so people understand is like a printing business card t-shirt company. But we did like large format import export. We ran 1,000 e-stores and did drop shipping for them out of Connecticut. So that one company that I helped one of my dearest friends start was still running, but it wasn't to the position that I could earn money from it yet. But it was like there was something there that I could kind of like lean on a tiny bit. But in reality, my friend Anthony I used to overdraft my bank card to go into Manhattan to borrow like $200 just to have money, right? That's like legit the level of, and then Chase shut my bank off. Then I had no debit card. So I knew that I wanted to do something that was impactful. And I always knew that having a massive impact in a good way meant you'd be financially good as well. And I think being in a unique position early in my 20s, again, it changed what I thought was like big success. Like money, having lots of money is nice because you could do more things and you can worry about less, like groceries and your credit card bill and things like that. But so that was less important to me at the time. It was like, just how do I buy food? And I could ask my parents. I don't want to make believe that like that wasn't there for me, but a 29-year-old asking their parents for like money for a date, it's like that was even worse. Like how low could I actually dig myself? So really the first thing that turned my thought process around, and this is maybe 2011 or 12, I'm not sure exactly, but at the time, like CrossFit was super fringy still. And Rich Froning at the time had like a BSN sponsorship, which BSN is a pretty big like bodybuilding supplement brand. And there was an ad in Muscle Fitness that he's doing a box jump on it. I think at the time it was like 2 times games champion, or maybe it was second and then first, whatever. And on the other side was the Olympia ad, and it was like Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman, and then all the triangles behind them. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm super fit. I'll either become a like Olympia bodybuilder, or I'll win this thing called the CrossFit Games. I'm more fit than this guy. And that was like, not even kidding, my belief. And I flipped a coin on which direction the next year would take me. And it landed on CrossFit. And I'm like, cool, I'll go win the CrossFit Games. And I ended up opening a gym from that night, because that night I like signed up for the CrossFit Games. I'd never had been in a gym before, like a CrossFit gym. And I'm like, whatever, I'll like pay the $20. I'll do the open and I'll go to the games. Called the gentleman who would become my business partner in my gym. And I'm like, hey, I like got to come to your gym to do this thing called the open. And then I go to the games. And at the time he had been going to regionals, which doesn't exist anymore, for a number of years. And he's like, seriously, what are you fucking talking about? I'm like, no, and I'm explaining it to him. So, I mean, needless to say, I obviously didn't go, but that was the first time I thought that I was a part of something again that was more than just figuring out how sad I was for myself. And then I was like, oh, there's something in this, like this micro gym space. I can do one of these. I drove home that night and was like, hey, like, let's just jump right into it. I'll go open a gym. How hard could that be? And that's how I built my gym.
So there's this theme, it sounds like, where you do things, right? You think about them maybe a little bit, but while a lot of people out there might hesitate or want it to be perfect before they even start, you see an opportunity, you have an idea, and you're just like, yeah, I'll flip a coin, I'll do it. I'll win the CrossFit games, I'll open a gym, so on and so forth. And it sounds like that has been a big part of your success and potentially also led you down some paths that have been hard and maybe not the best. Would you say overall that tendency to just go for it has been a net positive in your life?
Oh, by far. And I've failed way more than I've succeeded. I mean, I owned a real estate company that I was involved. I mean, I've had a number of businesses that have failed or sold or we walked away from. But there was a gentleman who worked for me and he made a joke once and he's like, man, we love to do everything twice here because Vin really likes to make sure we know how to do it the wrong way first. And I'm like, look, like, there's nothing worse. And I tell all my employees, like, there's nothing worse than not doing something. Just do it. And if we're wrong, we'll like, change course. And most of the time, my success, or failures, depending on what they are, really just always starts with the first step. And that's always the hardest part. So it's like, cool, let's just go and do it. I mean, like, I wasn't supposed to be a technology founder and that's something else that I've been doing. It's like, I think in professionally, the people who get the most at bats are going to win.
Mm. I like that. That reminds me of a previous guest used the phrase ready, fire, aim. You have to take action sometimes and figure out the direction second. And, just to go back real quick, the reason why I asked the question about how you viewed the next steps when you were at rock bottom is because in my mind, if I got to this pinnacle, I got to this peak, I was at this place that felt really high, and then I fell from that, I think my first thought for me would be, how do I get back up there? But clearly you fell from that place and then you did not climb vertically back up. You took a different path and still, right, elevated, but it wasn't the same way you came down.
No, not at all. And you said something that just resonated with a really important, I think, decision because when I was 275-ish pounds, right? At 5'6", that's pretty fat. And I was smoking cigarettes and drinking and doing cocaine. And when I was rock bottom on my way down there, I'm like, well, I can't save my companies, I can't save my relationship. I don't have any, like, again, redeemable qualities. And really the first thought to me wasn't climbing up. It was like, all right, what's right in front of me that I can control today? And it was those three things. Giving up drinking, smoking, and drugs was the easiest thing to control right in front of me today. And then I was like, okay, 30 days sober, lost 30 pounds, got hammered for a whole weekend, did another 30 days, then 60, then 90, right? And like, I always am like, okay, what's right in front of me right now that I can solve and that I can be in control of, and then move that out of the way. And then cool, what's the next one? And then what's the next one? So maybe that's really what on my way rock bottom, that's how I thought about it. Like, okay, what can I actually control right now today that can have any kind of meaningful impact?
That's such a powerful way to look at things. And as you talk about climbing out from rock bottom, you've already mentioned a series of hard things that you've done. I'm curious, when you look at your life, if you had to pick just one thing within your control that you chose to do, what is the hardest thing that you've chosen to do for yourself, and why did you choose to do it?
The hardest thing that I chose to do for myself, and why did I choose to do it? So my good friend, one of my best friends in the world, who I had that printing and promo business with, she passed away during COVID, not from COVID, from cancer. And it was at a time that my fitness business was dying. My technology company, we were trying to raise money and figure that out. And she was diagnosed with a really super rare form of cancer on her birthday. And then she was like dead in 45 days. And I think, to me, I've always looked at death in a really odd way. It's like, we're all gonna die. It is what it is. Like, get on and get going. And something that was wildly eye-opening to me, and horribly, it was such an odd, horrible, and amazing experience at the same time. And it was like, once they moved her out of oncology and into hospice, which was in her apartment, I probably was down in the financial district every single day until she passed away, just helping in whichever way that I could. And opting to watch someone die is a wild experience. And I don't mean, right, like, you're not talking about a 10-year journey of someone battling a disease. It was 45 days of pure deterioration of a human. So, and that was something that I knew I had to do because of the support in our friendship that she had given me over the years. I mean, I'd known her 20 years at that point. And it was interesting because I didn't know that I was getting something out of that as well in our friendship. And it wasn't closure by any means. I mean, I definitely just ignored it after she passed away for a long time. But like, watching each day as her condition worsened physically, like, you could see the weight coming off day by day, and things happening, and that was really difficult for me, and it was something that I didn't process for a long time. Look, business is hard and fun, and it's shitty, but like, it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't make a difference. Like, money is a tool, and power is a thing that people with it inflict on people without it. So like, all that shit is just table stakes. And really, the hardest things in my life have always been personal aspects of it. And that might be navigating friendships and being a good person when you don't want to be, or when it's really hard to be, or hurting people that you care about. And a lot of times that sticks with me far longer than like making a bad deal, or like making a decision that makes you lose some money and whatever, right? So that to me, like, I want to say that I had a choice in that, but I don't really think I did. But when you ask that question, that's what comes to mind, is like, knowing that your friend's dead, and she's like, "Am I going to die?" And you're like, "I mean, we're in hospice, so yes, but no, like, we could figure this out, right?" So that was like probably one of the wildest experiences that has ever happened to me, and her family ever.
If you don't mind me asking, what was her name?
Gia Vaca. Thank you. Because as I was just talking, I'm like, I should probably give her some voice. And I was fortunate. She was one of the closest people that I had in my life for a long time. And yeah, that was one of the toughest things that I dealt with.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking this, in what way was Gia's life and death a positive force of change in your life? You know, and how long did it take for you to realize that you changed from her passing?
Yeah, so she was a very career driven person, and a lot of what she did revolved around her career. And one of the hardest workers that I'd ever met in my life, ever. And it's sad because when you're gone, Joe, that's it. Like, 5 people care. And like, people make believe, and they go to your wake, and like, they fucking post it and all that nonsense. But in reality, like, 5 people actually give a shit about each of us, and that's it. And everyone just lives their life and you're done. It's like, it just is like you never existed outside of the memory of the last time I remembered her, right? It's like, so what one, and that leads me into, because I am a wildly driven person professionally, and it just, not that it's just irrelevant at the end of it. We don't die with it. We can't take it with us. If you have a family, by like your third grandkid down, they don't even fucking know who you are. So like, what is it even? Like, I don't know my great grandparents. If they left me $10 million, it wouldn't even fucking matter, right? So I don't think people realize how inconsequential we as individuals are over the course of all of human history and the 8 billion people here. And it's like, if you can have 4, 5, 6 really worthwhile people in your life, you're probably better off than most of the world. I ignored it for a long time, how I thought about this. And it's like, what is the point of doing amazing things if there aren't people to do it with? And I joke, it's like every great legacy or every great wealth is created by a person in a family tree who sacrificed their life for that. And I want to be that for my family and my friends and that's the person that I want to be. I believe in my heart that I'll get there. I might not, but that's the stake I'm putting at for my life, that I hope in the impact that I could give to the people who I employ and the people closest to me, that's some of the hope that I believe I'll leave. And it's amazing to think back, like the amount in which, the speed in which we forget people who are important to us when they're gone.
There's a quote I'd like to share that I think is appropriate. There are actually 2 quotes. I'll read the first. It's a Greek proverb, and it goes, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit," which is what I think you just talked about when it comes to building wealth or legacy, leaving impact for family, for friends, for society. And then also, when it comes to Gia, Thomas Campbell once said, "To live in the hearts of those we leave behind is not to die." And it might not be everybody, but if it's 4 or 5 people, and sounds like you're one of them, right? That's a life worth living.
Yeah. Yeah, that is both of those are amazing quotes, and I would say insanely accurate.
So with that being said, I had you answer this question in written form before we recorded, but I am curious, when you hear the word endure or endurance, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell a fitness story for this one, and it has less to do about fitness and more to do what I believe endurance to be. I grew up in Westchester County. One of my very good friends, and the gentleman you had on the show as well, Brian Mazza, is a big runner, and we ran together. I mean, I wouldn't say we ran together. He ran, and I tried to keep up with him. And one day I've run, I don't know, whatever, 10 miles, 12 miles. So just get out and run. And one day he's like, "Hey man, I'm gonna do a marathon today. Do you want to go run it?" I've never like signed up for one yet. And I was like, "Yeah, fuck it, let's go." And he's like, "We're just gonna run straight out, like 14 miles, and then just run back. One road all the way." And it's his normal like running path. And he stood with me the whole way. And then as soon as we turned around to run back, he was gone. Just absolutely fucking gone. And like gone enough, because we were on one road. So like, even if he was a mile ahead of me, like I could still kind of see him. And I cursed him the whole way, literally the entire way, because we didn't run with music, because we were like kind of chatting on the way up, and then when I finished, I'm like, "Bro, I thought you were gonna run with me the whole way." And he's like, "Yeah, bro, some battles we got to fight on our own." And right, like only like someone who's like friendly with you could say something like that. And I think about when you ask what endurance is, or what does it mean to endure, it's like when you're doing something that is worthwhile, and it could be worthwhile for your own means or worthwhile for the means of other people, right at the point in which you normally might quit or want to quit, and there's something that's like, yeah, let's just keep going here. That to me is what enduring or endurance is. And it could be in a run, it could be on a race, it could be in a workout, it could be in life, it could be just putting one foot in front of the other to achieve a goal. It could be in sobriety, it could be in figuring out how you're going to make payroll next week, right? But it's like, as soon as the point in which the vast majority of the planet will just get off the bus, when you go one step past that, that's where endurance starts to me.
That is great answer, and that is a hilarious story. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I agree 100% with that. And I also think, to just add on, when you do that, when you do take that extra step, when you do go a little bit further than you might have otherwise, you learn a little bit more about yourself. And some could argue that you actually transform who you are and who you're becoming in that moment. And I think that's really special.
Yeah, I found a ton of growth in running. I travel all the time by myself. Like, there's these certain pieces of life that you have internal dialogue. You find yourself in shitty situations where those self-talks change you. You might look at something different. You might have an epiphany, an aha moment. You might decide to completely change your life. And I think that's where magic happens. And I think that's why fitness and overall wellness as a whole right now is the new thing. There's no more, like, happy hour is not a thing. Partying's not, I mean, I'm sure there's still circles of it, but like, there's so much camaraderie and amazingness that happens in being healthy because of the high that comes from it. And like those moments of clarity that most people are just numb to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And this next question and this final question is really special to me. I think it goes along with what you just said and everything else we've talked about on the podcast. There are people out there who are at rock bottom. There are also people out there who are not at rock bottom. Maybe they're at a high and someday they're going to be at another low, because we all are. It goes up and down. But you get to speak right now to the people that are at rock bottom, who are feeling low, who are feeling down. We're just not sure what to do next. What would you say to those people?
So it's wild. Out of this whole conversation, I'd say that's probably the most important question, because Monday of this week, I sat down with a longtime friend of mine, someone who I lost as a friend when I had my nightclubs, who's in a rock bottom situation. And he's like, just how? Like, what did you do? How did you do it? And I said, look, everyone's got a different way to approach this. And this is what I would do for you right now. There's a couple things in your immediate kind of peer view that you have actual control of. Just pick one and take it off the board. It's just one. And it doesn't have to be big. It could just be like waking up in the morning and looking at the sunrise, or like waking up and doing a push-up. Just pick something that you could own and win every day. And it doesn't have to be big. And really the second one, and you'll be surprised at how impactful this actually is. Sit down and find 5 things that you truly get enjoyment from, because if you frame your life around those things, by default, each day will be better than the previous day. You'll have ups, you'll have downs, right? Reading is on my list. I read almost 100 books last year. I've read 1 book this year. You don't need it every single second of the day, but with those things as your guiding light, it's really easy to say, like, okay, everything is really bad for me right now. How do I even feel what a win could feel like? And once you feel a small win, it's really easy to find a second small win. And before you know it, you have a ton of wins all day. And when you do have 1 or 2 setbacks, and it could be as much as like going out drinking when you're trying to be sober, scratch it up, move on. Like it's the idea that we're tied to our mistakes, and the idea that rock bottom will always be rock bottom is somehow taught to us when we're really young, and it's just not the reality. it'll never be as low as you thought it was when you're in it, and it's never going to feel as awesome as you think it is when it's awesome, right? So it's like, if you could just find the win today, that's it. And again, it might be just like calling your sibling or your mom and telling them you love them and hearing that they love you back. That could be your win for today. Mark it, move on to the next win tomorrow. Small wins. That's the advice.
I love that. It's simple, it's actionable. I think it's applicable to each and every one of us, whether we're in a high or in a low. And it's controlling the controllables. And I appreciate that message a lot. And so if people listening to this podcast resonated with anything you said, they want to follow along and see all the things you're up to, or they just want to reach out and connect, where's the best place for them to do that, Vin?
You could find me on Instagram. I would say that it's not the best place to follow along my journey because, as my marketing team will reiterate to this, that I'm notoriously horrible at it, but it's easy to find me there, and it's Vincent Miceli, one word, and that's Miceli. So easy enough to find me. Reach out. I'll talk to anyone. If you're at that point that no one's there to listen, you'll get a convo and you'll get some action out of me. And it'd be my absolute pleasure.
That means a lot. I'll also second that. So now you have two people to talk to. Reach out, and Vin, seriously, I appreciate not only this conversation and our friendship that's starting to grow, but I just appreciate the energy and the perspective with which you bring to every single day. It's very, very contagious. And seriously, I say keep the mustache forever because it looks great.
Thank you. Look, this was an amazing conversation. I did not expect it to go in like the direction it went, and it was super. It was a very cathartic and awesome conversation. I mean, it was. I'm thankful that you invited me on the show, and I really, again, I love everything that you stand for, and the way that we were able to just talk. Hopefully, it made somebody make a list right now of what they want to do tomorrow. I mean, like that's if one person takes anything away from this, and that means we had a really impactful conversation.
Hey, it impacted me, so you got one right there, but I'm sure it did for many more. If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.